we're going to get ready. Well, thank you for, oh gosh, it's a little loud. Is that good? Okay. Thank you for, if everybody says it's good, so I'm not going to grumble. So let me just say from the beginning, if you're looking for a prescription for dealing with your enemies, you're in the wrong place. So the talk is loving your enemies, but I said to the last group that I'm on the faculty for the Hayden Institute in Asheville, North Carolina, which trains spiritual directors and people who work with dreams. And so this past summer, they asked me to do a workshop on loving your enemy. And they told me that I did that once before. I don't remember because I have not been trying to engage that conversation too much with myself. But I said, so God's trying to play a trick on me because God knows that at the moment, I've got no use for my enemies. I've got a list of them, and I'm just trying to see if I can work out the one-way space travel to get them off the planet. And if I could do that, that would serve my purposes very well. And so you know, when you're walking around with that little tape playing in your head, and then somebody says, well, could you do this workshop on love your enemies? You think, oh, somebody knows about that tape besides me, and it's called the Holy Spirit, and they're trying to get my attention. So then I had to take a deep breath and decide to really look into this some more and try to understand something about what is the Bible really saying about this. Because in the first place, we sometimes talk about scripture like God sat in a little corner and wrote all this out and sent it to us, and we know good and well that's not what happened. So I'm wondering, like when Jesus talks about loving your enemy and praying for them, for those who persecute you, in the first place, did Jesus really say that? And then what is the context that he's speaking out of? And what does it have to do with me in the 21st century? And even if it works for me, how does it work? How does it work across the globe? If it's something I'm supposed to hold on to and believe in, then how much can I universalize that thing to be all for all people? Because you just can't be walking around with your little lens looking at the world and thinking you're seeing everything. Recently, I was in Memphis, excuse me, my voice is getting mad at me. I was in Memphis, Tennessee back in September doing some work, and I was at the hotel coffee machine getting coffee, and I have this little mantra for myself that's helping me with the chaos of the present moment of saying, well, it could be worse. You know, it could be worse. I could be in Ukraine, I could be in Gaza, I could be in the Sudan, I could be many other places. I could have, like I could say with arthritis, I could have something that'll kill me. Arthritis won't kill me, it's just aggravating. So it could be worse. And it could be worse for me with my good life, with my sons and my lovely little house in the cul-de-sac that's quiet and nice, and you know, people coming to listen to me at workshops. It could be way worse than that. But it also could be better for a whole lot of folks. And so I need to not lose sight of that. And so I was standing at the coffee pot, and this young woman, I walked up and I said, good morning, and she said good morning back to me. And then she said, how are you? And I said, I'm fine. How are you? And she said, oh, not so good. And I said, oh, but you know, it could be worse. Oh, Miss Flippant Catherine Meeks, that you figured out your little mantra to help make your day better. Be careful how you universalize that notion. So she said, no, ma'am, I don't think it could be worse. We just lost my nieces. Her 6-year-old niece and her 8-year-old niece were victims in a house fire. And her mother, the children's mother and brother, had jumped out of a window and were okay, but the little girls died that morning, that evening, before I saw her at the coffee pot. And she started to cry, And then she said to me, do you want to see their pictures? And I said, yes. And so she went to them on her phone and showed me the pictures and talked to me about them. And just, we talked for probably maybe 10 minutes about her nieces. And then she said to me, well, if you are a woman of prayer, would you pray for us? And I said yes, even though I don't often say yes to people asking me to pray for them. I just say, I'll burn my candle for you because I burn candles every day in my house, and I burn it for all people whose paths I cross, and call names of folks at sometimes. So, but what occurred to me after that conversation was a simple, be careful how you say it could be worse. Be careful how you universalize what's working for you. Because it's working for you doesn't mean it's going to work across the board. When it comes to this business about loving your enemies, I think one of the most important things you have to do first before anything is to decide, why is this person an enemy, and what kind of enemy, and why is it an enemy to you? You know, but there are people right now doing a lot of bad stuff in this world, all across the globe. And we who claim to be in the kingdom of God, which is not the same thing as the empire, but we sort of lost track of that fact. You know, there are two kinds of energy systems that we as people of faith, I should say Christians, because I'm not sure how every other group thinks about this, that there's God's kingdom that we're working to bring into being, and there's the empire here that's thriving, sometimes anyway. And we have to decide, okay, is this, why is this? Is this an enemy because they offended you by not doing something? Does that make them an enemy? Did they actually do something to really hurt you? Or do you just dislike them because they're sort of like you? Like I said this morning, sometimes we have named people enemies, and actually, if we really interrogate ourselves and what they are and what they bring to us, we have some stuff in us that they stir up. And the way to deal with it is to label them and put them in a little box, and then you don't have to, you can say, I don't have to deal with you. So that interrogating ourselves to determine, is this really an enemy? Another thing that's important to have is a sense of integrity about where your integrity as a human being requires you to do what. So my integrity as a human being requires me not to forget that no matter how much somebody has turned themselves over to evil, that God still loves them just as much as God loves me. I don't want that to be the truth. I don't want God to love them like me, because I'm better than them, right? I'm not gonna hurt anybody just for the sake of hurting them. I'm not gonna live my life with the absence of good, which is when evil can come in and just take you over, Well, but you see, God is way above my pay grade, so I need to get off that little horse. Desmond Tutu helped me a lot with that, because Desmond Tutu lived so much of his life caught in between God's love and the evidence of the evil over here, and having to somehow keep those things in some kind of balance with each other. I mean, he just talked about how horrible that was, and how hard it was not to just get into absolute despair. So there's nothing simple about this. There's no simple little formula, you just do this and it'll all be okay. No, because it's too complicated in the first place. Who's the enemy? Why is it the enemy? How does the enemy relate to you? How is this, what is this happening? Why is this happening? Is there a message here for you? I mean, even as a culture, some of the stuff that's happening, the message is we need to change. We need to be different. We need to work on ourselves. There's things we need to interrogate. So sometimes somebody who brings that message is not they don't have the clothing on that you wish they had. Because sometimes you're not going to, it's hard for us to pay attention. We can explain so many things away until somebody hits us in the head with a baseball bat. And then you say, oh yeah, I've been hit in the head. Let me see, where did that come from? Who had that baseball bat in their hands? But until then, we just kind of walk around like we didn't know what was going on. So what is going on? Are there lessons to be learned out of the situation? And lessons for whom? And then I think at a very additional important place, one has to ask, what does in fact this all have to do with me? And I think Jesus is always talking to us about how to be the people God put us on the earth to be. Jesus is always inviting us to be connecting to that reality. And when you hate your enemy, what happens to you? Yes. You give up your power, you give the enemy control in your life, really. And it's so interesting to do that when they don't even know you are around. Someone said hating your enemy is like drinking poison and expecting them to die. You drank the poison, but your enemy's gonna die. Well, if you drink the poison of hatred, you will kill off some of yourself. Now, love is, we talk about love. I get so tired sometimes of hearing about loving because I don't think folks have a clue what they're even talking about. I think that if you look at the Corinthians conversation about love, there's some tough stuff in there about acceptance and all that stuff. But, there's some people that I don't need to be trying to have in my circle because they don't mean me well, and I need to name them, and I need to hold myself and them accountable by having some boundaries. And I don't need to hate them and give them control of my life in the process of doing that. That's hard stuff because it's just easier to hate them or decide you want to blow them up or whatever. I mean, you just have to, I went through a whole little period for a while with some folks who were doing some pretty nasty stuff to me, and I just had all kinds of imaginations about how to blow them up. But then I thought I'd get caught. And wouldn't it be funny, this woman that's going around all over the country talking about peace just blew up somebody. So I decided that was a bad idea. And then I thought about, defacing the property, but then they would have cameras. So there wasn't any outward vengeance that I was going to be able to pull off if I didn't want to take responsibility for looking bad for doing it. So I decided it wasn't worth that either. But inside my head, I had to work harder to let it go and to really come to grips with, these were the lessons I learned, excuse me, and this was important for me. And yes, I was very hurt because that's the other thing. When somebody has really done something to you that's hurtful and then you name them as enemy, part of the process is getting healed from the hurt. And it's important not to go, jumping down a little love your enemies trail without doing this kind of assessment, because you get down the road and you discover that you didn't go anywhere because you didn't really interrogate the situation the way it needed to be. When people have been molested in any way, whether it's sexual or just other psychological molestation, there's a fair amount of trauma related to that, and getting better, getting past it, loving your enemy makes no sense to them. What they have to do is love themselves enough to work on their healing, and in the process, come to grips with how they want to see somebody who would be that kind of person. And that's why I say it is so important to understand what your bottom line is. My bottom line is, because you are a human, I will not let you make me be dehumanizing in the ways that you have been toward me to cause me to want to do something to you. I will not let you be in control of making me become dehumanizing by dehumanizing you. You see? And so if I see you laying on the road bleeding, I'm going to call 911, even though I might have been wishing you would die. But I'm not going to participate in allowing it to happen, because if I participate in doing that, I have allowed myself to become like the thing I'm hating, you see? So Jesus is telling you, save yourself from that by just loving that person. And love, I think in that case, is to regard them as God regards them, as a human being with all kinds of things. If they've done something wrong enough, they need to be held accountable. If they've broken the law, they need to take care of that. If they've hurt somebody, accountability doesn't have anything to do with this. This is all about these situations that don't get into some of that. But people do need to be held accountable, and we do need boundaries. So I'm not here to try to say, oh, loving your enemy means everybody's got to be in your circle. No, there are folks that are not in my circle, and they're never going to be. And I'm not going to hate them, and they're not going to have power in my life. That's loving myself. And then when you're able to do that, when you're able to love yourself, you're able to then differentiate about people out here. And some people need to be, as my grandparents would say, my mother would say it too, I think, handled with a long-handled spoon. You know that concept? It may just be a Southern thing. It means it's a shortcut for boundaries, setting boundaries. Not setting boundaries that are based on anything except you recognize that person's got energy that is an enemy to your soul. And you're protecting your soul by setting a boundary. You do not get to hate that person. You get to deal with them. And I think that too might be another part of what makes us be sometimes so hateful toward folks, is that we don't deal with them. We get, not only are they enemies, they're also bullies. So psychologically, we get bullied, and then we hate the person even more because we don't have the nerve to stand up to them. So standing up to folks is important, and in this whole process of speaking up is important, and having clear-headed boundaries is important, and being clear about how you won't allow yourself, why you won't give your power away. Let me just leave it at that, so that you're not saying, in order to be okay here, I gotta somehow shrink. I gotta be a little smaller. People think that in domestic violence cases, so many times people think, the victims of it think that they were the reason, they did something, and they could be better if they, and then no, you don't get to do that to yourself. If somebody is trying to be abusive, you name it and deal with it, and you don't blame yourself, because like I told my children, there's not a single person on the planet that deserves to be abused. No place on the planet is either abuse acceptable or does anybody deserve it. So anytime abuse is occurring, that's the attitude that I bring to it. No, this is unacceptable. This is not going to be accepted in anywhere. So when people start talking about loving your enemies in those cases, and they want that to mean that you kind of forgive them and forget it, that's all a bunch of too cowardice to deal with reality response, which I cannot stand. I think we have to have the courage to name things as they come, and to tease out the stuff that I've been talking about and make decisions based on that kind of information, instead of some kind of edict out here that we hand off to Jesus. Now, I don't know what Jesus might say, but if Jesus were sitting here and in this conversation, but I would really be interested about what you might say. So how does this strike you, that I'm here, I'm not here with a nice little prescription, I'm not here with even a bunch of even kind words. I think sometimes, sometimes you just gotta, you gotta be honest. And sometimes you just really need to say whatever it is you need to say. And then you can sit with hearing what it is you need to do a lot better. And under no circumstances is there anything anywhere that requires anybody to let other people abuse them. And I do think that we get into that a little bit sometimes in the religious world, that we gotta love our enemies, which we mix that up with trying to be good. And there's some stuff in that Matthew scripture with the love your enemy thing about perfection. And I'm thinking, I don't know if Jesus said that or not, because it doesn't sound like Jesus to be talking about somebody being perfect when he knows good and well we can't be perfect. And so we got that mixed up with, let me try to make, the people that are doormats, that are thinking they're loving their enemies and the enemies are in their families, that's very convoluted, and that stuff has to be interrogated and dealt with because it's not well. It's not behavior that leads you to being well. So what I want to say to all of you is that it's complicated. This is a complicated kind of concept that deserves a lot more interrogation than it ever gets. Because we just fling off these words that Jesus said and assume that somebody's just supposed to go, really the person who's being hurt is supposed to be the one doing all the work in some ways. And sometimes you need to, not sometimes, but all the time, there needs to be more of a balanced look at what's really going on and how is it being played out. And in the religious world, we are really messed up about what this means. And we're ready to forgive stuff that should not be forgiven, and then to hold on to stuff that we should let go of, and then to try to push people into corners to make the systems that we've set up work, rather than being honest and open and letting folks be where they are and supporting people in journeys to health and wellness. If we were more into that, we would be less confused about what it means to love people that are not doing what's right, And I actually I use that language because that's the language we use, but I don't even like talking about this in terms of love, because it's not the same thing that I feel for my children or my parents or my good friends. It is a respect and a willingness to accept them as human, and a sense of somebody who's a real enemy, and a willingness to know that if I could help them, I would, but I'm not seeking them out, and I've got boundaries, and I'm not crossing those boundaries with them. There was a woman who had done so much to help, and she became just a viper, just viperous. And I thought it was a big shock to me, because, I can kind of just be a little naive, because I don't go around expecting people not to be okay. I mean, I got all these wonderful people in my life, so if I meet you and you're a stranger, I just expect you to be an okay person. And this woman just turned into somebody that was totally unrecognizable. And then I decided that I was just done with her, and then she wrote me, invited me to her house for Christmas, but she wasn't saying a word about all the stuff that she had done. Those kind of folks that will pretty much cut your head off and then come try to glue it back on, and without apologizing. I mean, like you don't supposed to know what's going on. And I thought, I already did invested everything that I had to invest in this, and this woman is not to be trusted and not to be in my circle. And I just wrote and said, thank you very much for your Christmas invitation, but I'm not able to be there, and I have no intentions of being in her circle anymore. And I don't hate the woman. If I did for a while. Hate is too hard of a word. I wanted to banish her. I wanted to put her on that spaceship that I've got the rest of my list on. But because, and you know why? Because it was so hurtful. I mean, that's what makes you want to do vengeance, right? It's not just about getting even, it's about trying to do something about the pain. So then I have to pay attention to the pain of being, of somebody being deceitful, of somebody being, that I thought was a friend who turned out to be a super enemy for no reason, except jealousy. Well, it's a reason. People have, there's always a reason for what people do. So this woman was jealous. But I don't, why would anybody want to be jealous of a 79-year-old woman with arthritis is what I'm thinking. Do you want to live in my body? I don't think so. Do you want to work as hard as I do? Are you out of your mind? But see, they don't see all that. They just see the stuff that they want to be jealous about. So it's complicated, and I'm sure that all of you know these complications because all of you've lived long enough to have these experiences where you had to sort through stuff and trying to figure out where you're in it and where you start and stop and what the lessons are and how do you do this and hold on to your sense of faith and care. And sometimes you just got to throw your hands up and say, God, they belong to you, and I'm glad they're your children and not mine. And then you just leave it be until you get to some places. I had to do that, and then it's funny because it freed up some energy to bring some light that I didn't see before. So now, I think of some of these people, and I have no energetic connections. Of course, you'll always have a memory. The memory doesn't go away, but there's no energy. There's no wishing. You don't get into your little vengeance cycle, right? So yeah, I see you smiling, so y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, sir.
My mom had a great phrase that she would use. They're more to be pitied than censured. And it was a way to kind of let people go their problem in your life without having to worry about fixing them or making them pay or just pity them, let them turn over to God.
Well, yeah. Well, and I think at some point there can be no energy connected to that period, or else because they're still jerking you around if you don't watch it. So when I think of some of these folks now, I don't have that many people actually that fall into this category, but it's sort of like whatever they're doing it, and it doesn't have anything to do with me. They don't have anything to do with me anymore, because whatever I was supposed to learn, I hope I've learned it. And if I get into another situation where anything begins to look like that, I can pay attention better, maybe. I can quit being a little bit, I can be naive about people and just try to want people to be exactly what I think they are. And then Maya Angelou said, when people tell you who they are, you should believe them. But I'm saying, oh no, you just think that. Don't talk like that about yourself. And boy, they're telling you the truth. And you just need to say, well, if you're that kind of person, how about if you leave now? Before we get into it, that has happened twice. I have encountered somebody whose energy I figured out quickly and thought, nah, that's the energy I don't want. That's another way to love yourself, by being honest with yourself about the vibrations that you're picking up from somebody and trusting that. And it's not like you're trying to do anything bad to them. You're just making a conscious decision that energy, you're not engaging with it. It's acting like a grown-up too. It's acting like a grown-up. Instead of being a child. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Be grown up, be whole. Mm-hmm. You're talking about interrogating yourself, shining the light on that part of you, making that one enemy, and setting up the boundary that you need to. That's all being mature. Mm-hmm. That's all coming to a degree of wholeness and not letting the anger or the hatred And also dealing with our own broken parts, because, I talked a lot about this morning about inner stuff. Ultimately, all of what's going on out here has something to do with what's going on in us. So people that get on our nerves and people that, and now, what I said is true. But then when you think about, okay, so what about people that are victims of war and all that? The story's different. I don't know quite how to, so I don't think you can fall into the apples and apples to apples, apples to oranges with everything. You just got to hold the dissonance that's in between them. So as soon as I said what I just said about the inner stuff, then I think about Gaza. So what do those people do? Why do they have to be blown up and not me? I have to hold that question somewhere, because what I said is true. It is inner stuff. But when you get to the collective stuff, you just gotta struggle with it. You can't oversimplify it. It is very true that when an individual is dealing with me and there's conflict and trouble, that it's got something to do with me. But when it's a whole society against another society, I think there's got to be some different explanations. But I think the principles work because somebody has done something to create a power imbalance that has allowed for the abuse of the folks that are being abused. And so the only place I come back to with all that is, let's stop trying to oversimplify life and deal with the complexities of it and the threads that run through everything, and try to tease out places to stand and make some sense for people who are people of faith. Because God didn't ask us to hide under the bed. God asked us to be out here trying to be the voices to help make sense out of the world that we have to live in. So all this stuff that I'm talking about today, I carry on this conversation with myself all the time as I'm trying to make sense out of how to be a respectable human. That I'm not trying to be perfect. I gave up that stupid goal a long time ago. But to be respectful of my sense of being sent to the world to do something, and trying to figure out what that is and trying to get on the right track to do it, involves all this stuff that I'm talking about. And it's complicated, and it makes it hard, because if you do that, you don't stand a chance to be a fundamentalist. Because the fundamentalist says, this is true, this is not true. And this is the way, this is the path. I have a fundamentalist sister that is clear that I'm going to hell because I'm just not the right kind of Christian. And I said, I am really trying hard to get my heretics license. If I gotta be locked into stuff, if that makes me a heretic, not if I don't want to be there, I don't want to be there. I want to stay with the fluidity, the paradoxes, the interrogations of stuff, and trying to make sense out of things. That's the life I want to live. And so, not this, it's this way and it's that way, and that's the only way. And then you put people in boxes and categories, and that's just not good. And that's not what Jesus Christ did. That's not what Jesus was about. And so I think that some words may have been put into Jesus's mouth about enemy stuff, given the way Jesus behaved in other places. I don't know. I care about the Bible. I read it, but I'm always looking for God everywhere, and for affirmation from God, because if God could speak to those folks 2,000 years ago, I guess God better keep on talking if I'm supposed to be listening. Because what you said to them, like I was a single mom for a while, and I would drive around in my car by myself, telling Jesus When was the last time you tried to raise 2 teenage boys on your own, you know? So whatever you say to me has got to make some sense for me with this situation that I find myself in, which means you better be talking to me now, because when 2,000 years ago, you didn't know anything about somebody like me driving around here and making Georgia with these teenage boys in a society that's not interested in them or me. So, you know, because if the stuff is not real, it doesn't work. Yeah, so other comments, you all. We got a few more minutes. Yes, ma'am. Speak up so they can hear. Oh.
So, in dealing with enemies and enemy situations and relationships, I try to practice the mantra, but also to live my faith in action by trying to follow Christ in believing that liking is optional, but loving is required. And looking for the love in that situation, and what is it that is requiring me in that situation.
And I don't think you can't direct yourself to do that. You have to live into the truth of that. You know, Rilke talks about how you have to learn to love the questions. I think we have to love the journey. We have to love the processes. We have to know that you're not going to wake up. You know, I got so upset at remember when in Mother Emanuel, the massacre of the people there with Dylan Roof, and that next day, the people who had lost people were talking about how they were forgiving Dylan Roof, and I just was furious at them because they were lying. Nobody forgives somebody the day after they've murdered their family member. You might try to think you did. You might say it because it's what you should say in front of the camera, but forgiveness is a process. And you kill my child, and I'm going to forgive you someday because I need to do that for myself's sake, but it won't be today. And I'm clear about that it's going to take me a while to get there. I understand why I need to do it and part of what I need to do, but I'm not going to be there today. But in the Black community, we've been so socialized to take it all. Whatever happens, we're just here ready. We're resilient, and we're back on our horse. You knocked us off 5 times, and last time you put a hole in our heads, but we got up again. No, we didn't get up. We're mad, and we're not getting up. That's what they should have been saying. You know, so I was yelling at them more than Dylan Roof, because I said, y'all need to tell the truth. You're enraged, you're heartbroken. 9 people have been murdered sitting in a Bible study, and you want to talk about forgiving the person that did that? That's not part of the conversation today. But we've gotten so into what the conversation's supposed to be until we act like it before it gets there. And that self-deceitfulness is a bad enemy to have. It's better to just tell the truth to yourself. And if you're trying to be perfect, which is, you know, we've been told, if you just be a little bit, the same thing we tell anybody who's being abused, just be a little better. So then the abuser can stop abusing you because you're a little better. It's not my fault that you're trying to abuse me, and you don't get to keep this up, whether it's individual or collective. So, but you can't just make yourself be there. I think that's important to remember, and I think people can get very impatient with themselves and feel badly about themselves because they can't make themselves be somewhere. You can't make yourself be somewhere you're not. You can express the desire to go on the journey. You can pray and work on going on the journey, and God will meet you on that path. I believe that from the bottom of my heart, that God will meet us on whatever path we're sincerely trying to be on. But we have to be willing to stay on the path and not get into, well, I told you I wanted to do this, and now I still hate this person, so I guess I might as well just forget it. No, that's too easy. That's oversimplifying. We have to say, it's a process and it's going to take a while. And it's going to take a while to want to. That's the first thing. You got to want to do it, because until you want to do it, you're not going anywhere, right? I mean, you're not. You got to say, I mean, it took me a long time to get to, well, I want to get past this, because I was kind of enjoying having the vengeance party in my head. You know, even though I wasn't fixing to go make the party in real life, thinking about it was pretty good. And so, right, have any of you been there? Do you know about having a vengeance party in your head? Yeah, and even worse, like what can I do to you? But then when you get done with that, you want to get on to some place where I want to get to the place that I've gotten to with some folks where mostly I don't think about them. I don't. They're not part of my world. I mean, that was whatever, that happened. I'm past it. Yeah, I will always remember it, but it doesn't have any energy for me anymore. And I go days and don't think about it. And that is really a good sign when you just don't go thinking about it. So what I've been doing here is not giving you any prescriptions, but just saying, if you're in a bit of a turmoil about this question, that's a good thing. And that you just gonna have to kind of be clear about what you believe, what we've been taught, and then what makes some sense to you in terms of reclaiming balance and peace in your own life around any set of relationships. In particular, whether those are people that have just hurt you in general, or people that have really tried to do you in, or people that have actually done something really, really bad to you. And I think that somebody that, you know, tore up your flower garden is not the same kind of enemy as somebody who killed your puppy. I mean, I think we have to make some differentiations about how we calling these people. And then look inside of ourselves. Always look inside of yourself to see if you find any little inkling of an energy system that helps to clarify this outer experience that you're having. Like where, you know, I have a picture of myself as a little girl hanging on the lamp on my nightstand to remind that little girl that I'm a big girl that can take care of her. Because that little girl gets freaked out by some of the places this big girl wants to go and says, have you lost your mind? I just want to go home and read fairy tales. So I have to tell that little girl, I know what I'm doing, and you don't have to worry. I'm not going to take you someplace. Nobody's going to kill you. Just hang in here. You know, because we've all got those little pieces of ourselves that still need to be worked on, and it's true when it comes to enemies and how we relate to them and how we manage in our lives to appropriate that kind of energy. So is there any one other comment or question, because I'm trying to be a good steward of being obedient?
Wanted to tell you that listening to you reaffirms how I raised my children. Everyone that comes to your life is bringing a lesson. What lesson are they trying to teach you? The negative or the positive? There's something in the lesson.
And you can pay attention. Yeah. Well, I see other folks are coming in, so I guess that means that we're stopping, but blessings to you all. Thank you.